Good morning. I hope that your day is going well. If not, I hope that things will improve. These are challenging times, and I think you should give yourself the breaks you need to get through them. On behalf of the Faculty Assembly Disability Committee, let me welcome you to our second day of the Symposium on Disability, Intersectionality, and Social Justice. All the events from yesterday have been recorded and will soon be available at our website, which also includes a wealth of disability resources and resources on inclusive pedagogy. Please note that for the open forums this afternoon, these are planned in hybrid form, which means that there is an in-person option. This will take place in room 2100 in the business school. The session for the faculty is at 1 p.m. and the session for the students at 2:30. Please remember which one you need to attend, because we want these to be safe spaces. I also want to assure you that there will be no recording for those sessions. Now let's turn to this morning, and let me welcome Sarah Sanders Gardner. She will be speaking and leading the activities. The topic is neurodiversity, different ways of thinking, and allowing students to demonstrate their mastery. Thank you for being here, Sarah. It's an honor to meet you. Sarah will be introduced by our Vice Chancellor for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Antonio Farias. Good morning and welcome, Vice Chancellor. Please go ahead. You have the virtual floor.
Good morning, Thorsten. And if you ever call me Vice Chancellor again, I'm going to dock you $1. It's always Antonio, to you colleagues. So good morning, everyone. And I want to just give a special thank you to Dr. Donnelly and the Faculty Assembly Committee on Disability for the extensive work that has gone into this symposium to make it happen. Really kudos to all of you. Long overdue, and hopefully this is the beginning of a cycle of continuous conversations around the topic that is most clear that needs work in the DEI space. After yesterday's deeply deliberative and inclusive presentation by Lydia Brown, and you'll note that, for my sad background, that I haven't yet taken the time to build myself a virtual mansion. I'm actually waiting for the Powerball to hit, and then I'll build the real one for lots of us. It's with great enthusiasm that I introduce today's speaker, Sarah Sanders Gardner. Sarah is a designer and director of the Neurodiversity Navigators Program, and she's adjunct faculty at Bellevue College in Washington. Sarah brings 20 years of experience working with autistic and otherwise disabled youth and adults in the K-12 and college setting. In addition, Sarah brings experience working with Microsoft in their neurodiversity hiring program, which I'm super interested in learning more about, as we have a lot of work to do here at CU Denver in terms of making inclusivity happen for our neurodiverse candidates. Sarah has been training hiring managers, co-workers, and applicants and employees since the inception of the program in 2015. Sarah is autistic and was diagnosed as an adult. Sarah does not use pronouns, although they them will also work. Sarah, the mic is yours. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Antonio. I appreciate the introduction. Welcome, everyone. I'm very excited to be here from near Seattle, Washington, where it has finally started to rain after not raining since June. So we enjoyed a lot of warm weather, but now we're happy to have the rain, and I'm happy to have you here. And one thing I would like to ask you all, if you are comfortable turning on your cameras, it's much easier for me to have a conversation with people that I can see. If you're not comfortable, that's okay. I won't be able to see all of you anyway, but if some of you are okay with having cameras on, that would be fantastic. Please feel free to make use of the chat and also to unmute and say something if you want to, or raise your virtual hand. I am used to teaching classrooms full of autistic and neurodivergent students, and this summer I taught a class full of 70 autistic and neurodivergent students, so almost as many as we have here right now. So hopefully I can handle it. So let me get started and share this. And I do think that we talked about how you can turn on the captioning if you want to, but it's a little button at the bottom of your screen that says live transcript. It has a little CC on it. and you can click on that and it will say show subtitles, and that will show the subtitles for you. If you ever have any questions while things are going on, please feel free to put them in the chat or simply raise your hand or simply unmute yourself and ask. And to unmute yourself, you will hover over your little face and unmute, or you can go down to the bottom left of your screen and there's a little microphone that says mute or unmute, and you can use it accordingly. So thank you very much for being here today, and I'm going to share my screen. Okay, and I also, Colleen, if you would remind me later to share the handouts, or if you have the handouts, if you could pop them in the chat, that would be fantastic. Okay, so right now you should see a slide that says neurodiversity, cultural responsiveness, improving communication and understanding, with logos for my Autistic at Work, which is my LLC, where I do consult with corporations for neurodiversity hiring programs, Bellevue College Neurodiversity Navigators, and the RISE Learning Institute, which is the division that I work under. So let's get started. And here's what we're going to talk about today. For our agenda, we're first going to talk about language use and definitions. And then we're going to identify your current practices. So what you're currently doing, regardless of what your position is, what you currently do to interact with neurodivergent people and share experiences that you've had. And those, you can get ready to type those in the chat if you want to. You can share them however you'd like. Then we're going to look at neurodivergence as a disability and as a culture, and look at some communication considerations and some tools. And then there's some further resources for you. So let's look at language use first. Many people in their education, in their formal education, have learned that person-first language, saying person with disability or person with autism, is the correct thing to do. But in reality, there are two ways to talk about people with disabilities or disabled people. And throughout this presentation, you're going to hear me lean more towards saying disabled person, autistic person. I choose identity first language for myself. As we heard, I'm autistic. I have other disabilities as well. And so that is the one that I choose for me. I was an English major in college, so I find it to be grammatically correct, but also it includes disability as part of the person, one of the many things that makes up that person. It embraces the disability. And many autistic people prefer identity first language, as well as the blind community, the deaf community. The majority of those communities also prefer identity first language. However, many people do prefer person first language as well. I find it to have an awkward syntax. However, they prefer it because it separates disability from the person. And they say, I don't want my disability to define me. It shows a desire to be distant from the disability. Parents and professionals often prefer person first language. In 2015, so a little while ago, the American Psychological Association came out with a style guide, as they do for many things, for how to use language around disability. And in it, they said that if you're writing a paper, a research paper or other paper, or doing a presentation, you should mix them up. You should use identity first and person first, because both are correct. However, if you're interacting with a disabled person, you should listen to what language they are using and mirror that language, even if you have your own preference. So if you're the parent of a child with autism and you're talking to an autistic person, you should use the language that they prefer. Or you can ask them if you don't know for sure. You can simply ask them which they prefer and use that language when talking with them. So when you get the copies of the deck, anything that's underlined has further information. So this link will take you to the style guide. I've tried to also put those on the resources on the very last slide. Then this symbol that we have here, the rainbow colored infinity symbol, is called the neurodiversity infinity symbol that many neurodivergent people have adopted as a symbol of neurodiversity. And it's meant to represent the many different ways to be neurodivergent, the virtually infinite number of people who fall under that umbrella, and to celebrate neurodiversity. And then I have the probably more well-known Autism Speaks puzzle piece, and I've put a do not use red symbol over it because many autistic people really dislike to the level of feeling that this is a hate symbol. And they say, I'm a person, not a puzzle. In fact, research has shown, replicated research has shown that when people are introduced to the concept of a puzzle piece in correlation with human beings, it has a negative connotation. And so not even talking about autism or anything, but just puzzle pieces and people has a negative connotation. And so avoid the puzzle piece unless it is the person with autism themselves that wants to use it, because some autistic people do like the puzzle piece. So along with other things to avoid, euphemisms are really important to avoid. And as you know, a euphemism is something that we use to avoid saying something that we find embarrassing or unpleasant. And just by using a euphemism, we are implying that something is embarrassing or unpleasant. So people do this a lot with disability. They don't want to say disability, or they don't want to say autism. And so they will say on the spectrum instead of on the autism spectrum, or they will say challenged or differently abled, or people of all abilities, or special needs, or disability with a capital A. Or they'll even make up words like diffability. Now, these are things that if a disabled person uses these words, that's okay. All communities have words that are fine to use within the community, but should not be used by people outside of the community. And so no need to correct a person with a disability if they are using one of these words. However, they should not be used by people outside of the community, as they are euphemisms for saying the word disability or disabled. So in fact, Anjali Forber-Pratt, Dr. Anjali Forber-Pratt, started a Twitter hashtag called #SayTheWord to emphasize this point that having a disability is not something to be ashamed of, and such euphemisms deny the existence of disability and reinforce the stigma surrounding disability rather than embracing it as a valued aspect of diversity. So as we heard Lydia say yesterday, disabilities, diversities bring value in and of themselves. And so it's important to not erase it. Yes. Okay, so what is neurodiversity? The term neurodiversity was coined by sociologist Judy Singer in Australia, and she jumped off the word, somebody needs to mute themselves. I'm not sure who. She jumped off the word biodiversity, which, as this picture over here with all these green critters shows, refers to every living thing, including plants and bacteria, animals, humans, sometimes in a particular region or ecosystem. And so biodiversity, we try to protect biodiversity because without it, things can't grow and things can't flourish. So Judy Singer realized that the same is true for the way minds think. And so she coined the term neurodiversity to refer to the virtually infinite neurocognitive variability within the human population. Actually, Cornelius, it's the other way around. Harvey Bloom popularized it. Judy Singer coined it. So this points to the fact that every human has a unique nervous system with a unique combination of abilities and needs. So years later, probably about 10 years later, a multiply neurodivergent person in the United States, Kasian Asumasu, coined the term neurodivergent to refer specifically to people whose brains function in a way that diverge significantly from the dominant societal standard. Or some people now are saying neurominority. If you're on TikTok, you'll hear neurospicy. There's lots of different plays on that word at this point. And along with that, the word neurotypical to refer to an individual whose neurocognitive functioning falls within the dominant societal standard. If you go to this link, you will hear what Judy Singer has to say about it. And if you look on the internet, you will find a lot of talk about Harvey Bloom, who wrote about neurodiversity. He got the term from Judy Singer originally. Okay, so what falls under the neurodivergent umbrella? So what's important to note is that neurodivergence is an identity that someone claims for themselves. It's not a diagnosis, but all of these things are medical diagnoses that someone will get from a medical practitioner, or now self-identifying is also a very accepted practice because, again, as Lydia pointed out, certain people do not have access to diagnoses. And so it's okay if someone self-diagnoses, and it's very accepted now. So we're going to talk about what these are: dyspraxia, dyslexia, dyscalculia, ADHD, autism, Tourette's syndrome, but it can also be acquired. So things like traumatic brain injury, dementia, plus other things fall under the neurodivergent umbrella. Mental health can fall under the neurodivergent umbrella if someone identifies as neurodivergent. And other things like cerebral palsy can fall under it, Down syndrome. It really just depends on how that person identifies. So what we're going to do right now is share your experiences and current practices working with, living with, going to school with neurodivergent people. So please do write in the chat, unmute yourself, raise your hand, and share with us things that you do or have experienced that are supportive of or good experiences with neurodivergent people. Whoever goes first gets an extra point. Providing quiet breaks, quiet working spaces, offering breaks, different approaches, learning the material because I myself do not learn in a dominant way. 4-year-old son was diagnosed, combined circumscribed developmental disorder just last week. Yes, I bet you are feeling overwhelmed. Uniquely Human is a great book for you, Liz. Yes, clarify or expand on the question, please. Yes. So any experience that you may have had going to school with, living with, working with, teaching, serving at a front desk, anyone who you consider or may have experienced as being neurodivergent. So any of those people that we talked about in this last slide, or someone who just communicated differently from you and you didn't know. Communicate through gestures and written reminders. Family member has dementia and another one has a learning disability. Yes. And you do have to change your communication for sure, and your understanding. My sister, one of the most intelligent and most sensitive people I have ever known. Yeah, no longer with us. I'm sorry. Supporting their desire to work alone rather than in groups sometimes. Enjoy the way that their logic is different from my own. Yes. Presenting materials in different modalities. For sure, Colleen. Yes. Adding language to position descriptions that encourages neurodivergent applicants to apply. Yes, Antonio. TRIO supports students who are with a documented disability, low income or first gen. We support them in whatever they need. Yes, with the DSS office to be more holistic in the support. Sometimes listening and giving them a place where they can create community. Yeah, very important. And sometimes people forget that, right? With disabled students, that they need community and support and someone to listen. Offering a variety of ways to connect and having open expectations, not requiring people to call me or turn on cameras or mics. Yes. I have one whole online class this quarter. It's synchronous, so we meet, but no one talks. They all just write in the chat. Preview what you're doing. Yes. Help plan ahead. Ask the students to summarize a lot. Yes. I'll stop mid-class and ask everyone to raise their hand if they're still with me or if they understood the last thing we presented. Yes. Explaining to professors. 3 positives for each negative. Very good. Yeah. Offering multiple options for assignments. Yes. Dysgraphia, using typing and talking to text as opposed to handwriting, for sure. To and non-speaking in the process of being diagnosed. We've had to find ways to communicate with her to meet her wants and needs. Yes. Okay, I'm not gonna be able to read them all, but this is fantastic. Hopefully everyone else can read them all. So, Owen, I'm neurodivergent along with most of my friends and probably a few family members. Yes, working on connecting and building neurodivergent community. Yes, a lot of times you will find if you're neurodivergent, you end up having neurodivergent friends because of what research shows that I'm going to talk about. Wow, Shannon, you've got a lot going on there. Flexibility, yes. Yes, and Sophie, disclosing your own diagnosis really supports disabled students in knowing that they're not alone. Yes. Kay as well. Acknowledging signals of anxiety. Yeah, this is great. Oh, Laura, yes, taking time to get to know each person as an individual. Yes, and Sophia, making sure that the younger counselors understand the needs of the students, yeah, or the campers. Yeah, really good. Lots and lots of experience here. Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. I really like to have interactive because I don't have all of the experience in the world. I have quite a bit of experience, but I don't have all of it. And so it's great to learn from each other as well. And so please do look at what your colleagues have written. And these are all fantastic pieces of advice and information, and you can learn from them. And I'm going to put the name of the book that I recommended. This is Uniquely Human. Oops. If only I could type. By Barry Present. Really excellent book for anyone with a newly diagnosed child or anyone with a child. Okay, thank you so much for all that great stuff that you shared. Oh yeah, I don't, Colleen, are you able to share the handouts?
If you've got, I'd have to go get them. I was going to put them up on our site, Sarah. If you want to share them in the, in here, you probably can get to them faster.
Okay, let me see if I can do that. Yeah, I would like you to have the handouts while we're talking. Okay, it looks like it went through. Does everyone see it?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so now you've got those, and I will start again. Okay, here we go. Okay, so let's talk about neurodivergence as a disability and as a culture. Thank you for asking for those. I didn't realize that you didn't have them. All right, so here's a quote from Judy Singer in her reflections on neurodiversity. Neurodiversity is a property of the human population of Earth. While neurodiversity itself is just an indisputable fact about the planet, the neurodiversity movement is something else again. It's built on the idea that just as conserving biodiversity is necessary for a sustainable, flourishing planet, so respecting neurodiversity is necessary for a sustainable, flourishing human society. And so thinking back to what Lydia said yesterday about ableism, often neurodivergent people have been shoved aside and overlooked because of our differences, and people consider us not worthy of interaction or lesser than. So I want to look at how neurodivergent people have historically been treated. And this is all the intersections of neurodiversity, particularly of other oppressed and repressed populations that have been treated with, in the United States especially, through a deficit medical model or prescriptive model instead of the social justice model, which we're going to talk about as well. So this medical model seeks to fix the person, and that may be by putting them in a behavior classroom, or that may be by putting them in a social skills class. Either way, they're trying to fix the student and make them more typical, make them behave or make them communicate the way the general population does. In fact, the most popular treatment for autism, applied behavior analysis, their goal is to make them indistinguishable from their peers. So they want to fix the person. They see the person as the problem and believe that there's one correct or typical way of being in the world. Embrace those cultural constraints that say everybody needs to be the same way in the world. That's that white supremacist culture that we have here in the United States. Now, the medical model is okay if you have a broken leg, right? You'd probably like that to be fixed. Or if you have diabetes, right? You'd maybe like some diet advice, or perhaps you need medication for it. However, if you're neurodivergent and your brain simply operates differently, a better model is the social justice model, or the descriptive model that describes what's going on. And so this model seeks to empower the person to use their strengths. And in our program at Bellevue College, that's exactly what we're doing. Yes, Cornelius, ABA trauma is unbelievable. And we see it at the college in a ridiculous amount. But that's another whole conversation. So the social justice model seeks to empower. We have educational classes that our students take alongside their chosen program of study to specifically teach the students to seek out and find their strengths in different areas that they've always been told that they're terrible at. And so they're looking for their strengths in self-advocacy. They're looking for their strengths in executive functioning and their strengths in social interaction and their strengths in self-regulation. And how can they use those strengths when they run into barriers? So this model seeks to empower the person and sees barriers to access as the problem. And so this also works on the job, right? So looking for barriers to access rather than changing how the person naturally interacts with the world. Oftentimes, the barrier to access for a neurodivergent person is attitudinal. This also believes that there are many acceptable ways of being in the world and questions those cultural constraints that say everybody needs to do things and communicate the same way. So as this picture shows, we don't want to paint our red apples green. We want to keep all the different colors and flavors of apples in our basket. We want to maybe add some other fruits and maybe even some vegetables. So let's take a quick look at what do the disability models look like on a college campus? And you can please also share in the chat any experiences of what you think the medical model might look like on a college campus. So reminder that the medical model is trying to fix the person, trying to make everybody behave the same way or communicate the same way. So thinking about in the classroom, thinking about at a front desk, thinking about in advising. Students need to report disability, strict mandatory attendance. Yeah, we know lecture style teaching, requiring a diagnosis, putting the burden on the student to disclose and ask and know what their specific accommodations should be. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. No flexibility in assignment delivery. Yes. Really good examples of medical model. What are some examples of social justice model on a college campus? Yeah, one grading rubric for all students, no diversity when it comes to idea of participation. Yep. So what's an example of social justice model then? Let's flip that one, right? Flexible grading, flexible participation, universal design for learning. Yes. That covers a lot of ground, right? What about at a front desk? What might it look like? A social justice model. Process for getting official accommodation seems to be a barrier for students that need them most. Yes, it is. And so changing that process, Sophie, would be an example of the social justice model. We're doing that at our college. We do not require medical documentation for most disabilities at this point. And that's actually a shift that's been going on across the country. Hopefully we'll hit most colleges at some point. Yeah. Designated spaces for community with other disabled people is a great example of social justice model. So let's talk about that front line really quickly. At a front desk, most front desks might have like a line where people have to stand. And let's say you're a front desk person. If you see someone in the line who's in distress, rather than just making them stay there, or if someone like jumps to the front of the line because they don't understand the social things, having a place where they can go to wait, or a place where they can sit to wait, or another person you can send them to, is a social justice model. At some point, Owen, probably in the faculty thing later on today. Yeah. I don't work in the Disability Resource Center, so that's not my area of expertise, but we can talk about that briefly. Okay, so great. So let's move on and look at the definition and impact of these different disabilities. So autism is primarily a communication difference, especially in the use of nonverbals, not non-speaking, but nonverbal, using and understanding. And I'm going to talk about that in a couple of slides. Sensory processing sensitivities, often rising to the level of sensory processing disorder. In fact, 85% or more of autistic people have sensory processing disorder. Now, 15 years ago, the researchers were saying, no, sensory processing disorder is not part of autism. And so this is an example of researchers listening to the actually disabled people and saying, maybe it is, because we just kept saying, yes, it is, yes, it is, yes, it is, yes, it is. And they finally listened to us. Executive functioning differences, 75% of autistic people meet the criteria for ADHD. I'm going to talk about that on the next slide. Motor and other processing differences. Many, if not most of us, have a whole body movement disorder called dyspraxia, which exists along a spectrum. So in most of us, it looks like tripping on things, dropping things, knocking things over, spilling things, stuff like that. For some autistic people, it will they will need to take occupational therapy for motor planning, or they will need to use assistive devices because they can't move their lips to speak. Differences in socializing, we're well known for that. And then innovative problem-solving skills, because we see things differently. Okay, so ADHD is well known for having executive functioning differences, including attention differences. So executive functioning, executive functioning, as you likely know, is the little computer that runs in the back of your mind that helps you get things done. So from the minute you get up till the minute you go to bed. So things like time management, organization and planning, impulse control, which we call response inhibition, working memory, which is keeping something in your mind in order to use that information. So it could be thinking about how your classes worked last quarter in order to choose courses for next quarter. Working memory is also the thing that lets you down when you go from one room to another room and you get to that room and you say, why am I here again? That's your working memory that let you down. Okay, so some communication differences in ADHD. May complete work in unconventional ways. When my son was in college, I could have sworn to you that he was never doing homework, but he managed to pass college and graduate. And then an ability to hyper-focus and block out everything to the point that they forget to go to class, forget to go to meetings, forget to eat, forget to sleep, that kind of thing. And then let's look quickly at dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia. Dyslexia is pretty common and up until recently was not diagnosed very frequently. Schools just kind of ignored it. So this person will process spoken language better than the written word. If you have someone in your classes who's not reading things, they probably need videos and audios and things like that. Fortunately, Canvas will read stuff to us, which is great. We'll talk about that next in the next thing. This person may use flexible. Yes, some people with ADHD do have some sensory processing. Yeah. They may use flexible spelling and grammar, meaning they might spell the same word 3 different ways, 3 different times, encouraging them to use a spelling checker. No, these are entire population. I'm talking about all neurodiversity, all neurodivergence. They learn better from experiences than from reading, but have a good ability to see the big picture. Dysgraphia is an interesting disability because usually we think of it as bad handwriting or a difficulty with writing, so pain and fatigue or illegible handwriting, but it's also known as disorder of written expression. And so this person likely has a difficult time writing essays. They may use a shorter sentence structure. They may answer questions very briefly. And so they need more prompts. They need additional questions. They need support in getting this stuff out. This comes up when they're in an interview. They need to be asked additional questions. They need to bring prompts with them to the interview so that they can refer to things. They need to have things written down. But they usually have a strong memory for detail, so when they're prompted, they can respond. Dyscalculia, math disorder, affects up to 6% of the population, so not uncommon. They might need to use a calculator. So it can affect typing in that the person has difficulty coming up with the words, right? Now, if they have weak arms or wrists, they can have pain and fatigue when typing as well, yes. But people mistake it for a fine motor problem, and it's not a fine motor problem at all. So dyscalculia, the person, yes, and dyspraxia can affect typing too, yes, and a lot of these are intermingled, which we're going to see on the next slide. So a person with dyscalculia, it affects lower level math skills, but not higher level math skills. And so if someone can get through these lower level math classes by being able to use a calculator, for example, then they may have no problem at all with calculus, discrete mathematics, etc. They just need to get through the lower level math. It can also affect spatial awareness, sense of direction, time perception. And they usually have a strong memory for the printed word. So you'll see all of these things come with other neuron branches that gave different strengths. So I want to take a quick look at or deeper into the autism spectrum, because often we hear of the autism spectrum as this linear spectrum with low functioning autism on one end and high functioning autism on another end, when in reality, it's much more complicated than that. And the medical community and the autism community have asked us, not to use those terms, low functioning and high functioning, for a couple of reasons. One, they aren't descriptive. They don't tell us what's going on with the person. And two, they're insulting. Anytime you rank people as far as low and high, it's not an appropriate way to talk about people. If I were to introduce someone to you, I would introduce them by their strengths. So if I was going to introduce Colleen, I would say Colleen is an extremely organized person. She's very friendly and warm. She gets embarrassed when you compliment her. I would never introduce Colleen by her level of functioning, right? And so it's not appropriate to do for autistic people either. So Rebecca Burgess, who goes by Theora on Tumblr, took the spectrum color wheel and put, oh yeah, for sure it's ableist, yes, Owen, and put things around it that affect autistic people, but really all people, right? Language, motor skills, perception, executive functioning, sensory, and then put these little dots in here that reflect this person's ability in this area at this moment in time. So in this environment and in this situation. So these are movable depending on where the person finds themselves and what's going on around them. So if this represents me, my language skills are okay, my motor skills are decent, my perception is good, my executive functioning is good, my sensory processing is not so great. I have a pretty decent sensory processing disorder. Most days, these kind of move around pretty well. When the garbage truck comes and picks up the garbage, I, need to put on earplugs to deal with that. Now that I'm working from home most of the time, I'm better. I used to come home in pain every day from the sensory assault, from the noise of being on a college campus, but I don't have any pain now from being home from the pandemic, which is a very interesting thing that happened. Now, there have been 2 times in my life when this has happened and I have lost all of my ability to move, speak, think, anything. And they've been in 2 different parts of the country, but very similar situations. So they were in large conference centers where I was presenting to 500 to 1,000 people. So there's always that little murmur that goes on, right? I can't mute people in a conference center. And there are bright lights, they're recording, and it was an unfamiliar place to me, 2 different places, and a fire alarm went off. And so they had the flashing lights, and I have a seizure disorder, and the loud noises, and I have a sensory processing disorder. And so I lost all of my abilities and just stood there rocking back and forth, covering my ears. Someone had to lead me out, both of those times, a couple of years apart. Now I say this not to scare you that this is going to happen all across campus when a fire alarm goes off, because those are very different circumstances, right? Usually the students are used to their situations. They're not as sensory assaultive as a large conference hall. They live in that city, etc. I bring it up to take note of the fluctuating levels of capability of neurodivergent people, and really all people. If you stop and think about it, you also have fluctuating levels of capability, right? There's some days where you just didn't sleep well and you're kind of dragging the next day, or something's going on at home and you can't really focus on what's going on at work, right? So everybody has fluctuating levels of capability. Neurodivergent people are more sensitive to their environment and to their situations than typical people are. And so we may need more support. So the person who said, get to know people individually, that's very important, because otherwise you won't know what's going on with people. Okay, so let's look at some co-occurring disabilities, because neurodivergence does not exist in a vacuum. If you have a neurological disability, you likely have more than one. And so some things that go along with this are nonverbal learning disability. I promise I'm going to talk about it. All autistic people have a nonverbal learning disability, some spectrum of that. Auditory processing disorder is the difficulty understanding language, especially in noisy environments, but sometimes just period understanding language. It's on the rise, partly because people realized they had an auditory processing disability when everyone started wearing masks and they could no longer read lips. They realized, oh, I don't know what you're saying because I can't read your lips. Turning on captions is a great fix for this, or wearing a clear mask is helpful too if someone needs that. Dyspraxia, we already talked about, that's the whole body movement disorder, executive functioning variances. Visual processing is another neurological difficulty. For me, it expresses itself as prosopagnosia, or better known as face blindness, where I won't recognize you if I see you again. Like, Colleen, if I see you in real life, I won't know who you are. You'll need to introduce yourself to me, even though I've seen you on camera. This is another way that virtual meetings has been fantastic for me, because everyone's name is listed right under their picture. And so it's just been so great. But on campus, I don't recognize people. So when they walk by me, they'll say, "Hey, Sarah, how are you?" And I'll be like, "I'm great. How are you? It's great to see you." And I have no idea who they are. If they know me, they know I don't know who they are. So they'll say who they are. But obsessive compulsive behaviors, not necessarily rising to the level of obsessive compulsive disorder, although that could be a neurodivergent disability. But obsessive compulsive behaviors, where needing things to be in a certain way, or needing their schedule to be a certain way, or different things like that. So that's an important thing to note, that this can be co-occurring with some neurodivergence. Expressive language, all human beings under enough stress will lose the ability to speak. And as noted, we experience stress more quickly than others. Prosody is pretty rare, but I bring it up because it can be quite off-putting when you experience it. So that's tone of voice. It could be someone who speaks really loudly, someone who speaks really quietly, someone who sounds angry when they're not. I have one female student in my class right now who always sounds angry. Every time she talks, she just sounds like she's mad, but she's not. That's just how she talks. So just knowing that that is not something that can be changed. And then anxiety and depression just kind of overrides all of this. And most of us are also very tenacious because we've had to learn to be. So just a quick reminder, like everyone, neurodivergent and autistic students and colleagues are handling a lot every day. Remember to check biases, remove barriers, and use the communication tools that we're about to cover. And these are, for the most part, non-apparent disabilities, unless you are also neurodivergent yourself, in which case you're like, yeah, you can pretty much tell who is because you get along with them. We're going to talk about why that is. So let's look at some biases and barriers: stereotypes, ableism, ability privilege, and cultural expectations. So there's a lot of things that are believed about, yes, and DDAR, yes, about neurodivergent people. One is that we're highly intelligent or that we're intellectually disabled. And the reason for that is this IQ graph that I have here, if you believe in IQ graphs. So this is a typical one where 25% of the people are intellectually disabled and 25% of the people are highly intelligent on the graph. For neurodivergent populations, 35% of the people are intellectually disabled and 35% of the people fall under that highly intelligent. So it's kind of stretched out a little bit. That's where that stereotype came from. People also believe that we're prone to meltdowns and anger, or that we're rude and we dislike people. The meltdowns and anger comes from the prosody is one place, but then also the fact that people are posting videos of their little ones having meltdowns all over the place. It does nothing to help their little one when they turn 18 and they're looking for a job, right? And so if you think about how you handled your emotions when you were 10 years old and how you handle your emotions now, the same is true for neurodivergent people. We grow and we learn how to handle our emotions. Now, a little caveat for college: if the environment is conducive to neurodivergent students, you will have very few meltdown situations at your college. If the environment is not conducive, you will have more. So we still, even though we have a really great environment we still have a couple of meltdowns a year, right? We handle those in a developmental manner, even if they have to go to conduct, because you cannot violate the student code of conduct, even if you're disabled. But we handle them in a developmental manner, right? Helping the student figure out how are you going to figure out how to not do that again, usually by proactively dealing with the situation before it gets to the point of meltdown. That's usually what we help them figure out. The rude dislikes people comes often from our use of nonverbal communication, in that we are very forthright, and we're going to talk about that. Previous research into how we interact showed that we have no empathy. More recent research shows that it's called the double empathy problem, which shows that we don't understand typical people and typical people don't understand us. So both groups have difficulty empathizing with the other group, and actually more accurately, both groups have difficulty showing empathy to the other groups. So we don't necessarily pick up on the empathetic outreach of the other group. People think we can't make eye contact. Hopefully most people understand that's not true at this point, and a lot more. Okay, so ableism. I loved Lydia's description of ableism yesterday, that it is the root of all isms. It had its beginnings in putting some people above others and below others. This is a definition by Talia Lewis, who says a system that places values on people's bodies and minds based on societally constructed ideas of normalcy, intelligence, and excellence. These constructed ideas of normalcy, intelligence, and excellence are deeply rooted in anti-Blackness, eugenics, and capitalism. This form of systemic oppression leads to people in society determining who is valuable and worthy based on people's appearance and or their ability to satisfactorily produce, excel, and behave. Importantly, you do not have to be disabled to experience ableism. So one example is faculty saying to a student, taking notes by hand helps you learn. You don't need a note taker. And that comes from research that came out that showed that for 95% of students, taking notes by hand helps you learn. The students you're saying that to is in that 5% that it doesn't help. Okay, so things to consider, word choices that you're using, attitudes, and people often don't consider that over helping a student is ableist. Doing things for them that they can and should be doing for themselves is ableist. Feeling uncomfortable around them. So check yourself. If you're feeling uncomfortable, how can you feel more comfortable? What's making you feel uncomfortable? Inspiration porn, using the stories and lives and bodies of disabled people to inspire us and help us feel good, that's what inspiration porn is. And then activity choices that you choose. Are you doing an activity where you toss a ball at people in the classroom to answer a question? If someone has dyspraxia, that is a really scary activity to do. I had to leave a classroom once where they were doing that because I have trauma from dodgeball, as many people do. Okay, so, and then also just environmental barriers. What barriers are there to your classroom, to your college? And I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the ugly laws. These were on the books in Chicago as late as 1974, laws that said that it was illegal to be out in public if people found you unsavory to look at. And this mostly affected veterans, other disabled people. So here's an example of this from our college from years ago. It's gotten much better. We used to be located in the library. Our offices were in the library. And when we were first there, the librarians would call me all the time to ask me questions about what to do. So they called me one day and they said, Sarah, we have a problem. We don't know what to do. There's a student who is talking to themselves. And I said, okay, well, tell me more about it. Where are they? They said they're standing in front of the TV monitors. So they have 2 TV monitors that have the news running all the time, no sound, just the captions. 2 different news stations. You can imagine what they might be. I said, oh, okay. Are they yelling? Are they swearing? Because that's what I would be doing if I was talking to myself in front of those news monitors. And because I'd have to walk by them and not even look at them. And they said, nope, they're just having a conversation with themselves about what's on the news. I said, all right, are they blocking anyone's view? And they said, no, they're standing off to the side. I said, okay, well, refresh my memory. Is that area a conversational area? Because we have conversational, collaborative, quiet, silent areas. They said, yeah, it's a conversational area. I said, okay, so what is the problem? And they said, well, the other students are coming to us and saying that they're bothered by this student. And I said, oh, okay, no problem. I know exactly what you need to do. And they said, oh, good, we knew you would know. I said, for sure. When the students come to you and they say that they're bothered by this other student, just tell them all the other places in the library that they can go where they won't be bothered by this student. Because there is nothing in the student code of conduct that says you cannot talk to yourself in a conversation area in the library. It's okay to be weird in public. In fact, Mel Baggs, who we lost during the pandemic, said, we're here, we're weird, get used to it. So, but that's an example of the ugly laws that make people think they have a right to not be bothered by our weirdness in public. They shouldn't have to watch us stim in class. All of those things. Okay, ability privilege, like any privilege, if you have it, it's hard to recognize it, right? So you have to always be thinking about the privileges that you hold all the time and how are they affecting your interactions with students. Okay, I want to talk about the cultural iceberg. You may or may not know Edward T. Hall, who was a cultural anthropologist with a specialty in nonverbal communication. So what Edward Hall said was, when we think about a culture, we usually think about these surface culture things: food, music, literature, language. But what really makes up a culture are these deep culture areas that you have to live in the culture and learn through nonverbal observation. If you are neurodivergent, especially autistic, you're not picking them up because you have a nonverbal learning disability. When I first saw this, I was very excited because these are the areas that we get in trouble, quote unquote, throughout our lives, even in the workplace, maybe even especially in the workplace where it's like pretty high stakes. So things like communication styles and rules, facial expressions, eye contact, conversational patterns, how we display our emotions, how we use our tone of voice, notions of courtesy and manners, self and time, fairness, attitudes towards work and authority, approaches to religion, decision-making, problem solving, all of these things and more. There are potential conflicts in all these areas. If you've traveled overseas or you've entertained guests from another country or you've interacted with them, you've likely had some conflicts or uncomfortable moments in some of these areas. Or if you work with international students, for example, some international students in their country making eye contact with the professor is rude, right? So they'll talk to the professor like this and they won't look at them because that's rude. Here, if you don't look at the professor, you're being shifty or you're lying to them, right? So that's just one of many examples. So neurodivergent people find themselves in conflict quite a bit. And because of the narrative around that we're messed up, we're expected to change. So here's the problem with that. Here's an example from my life. I grew up in Buffalo, New York, where we had basements. And in one house in the neighborhood, it was perfectly fine to jump on the sofa and swear. And in another house, you got in trouble if you did that. And they would call your father, who was a Baptist minister, and your mom, who was a first grade teacher. So yeah, so I got in trouble in lots of different areas of my life because I never knew, I couldn't follow the nonverbal signals of when it was okay to do something and when it wasn't, when I was going to get in trouble, when I wasn't. I was in trouble for talking in class, for all these things, right? So my parents decided to put me in a class to learn how to not get in trouble. So what do you think they taught me in the class to do to not get in trouble? They taught me, don't jump on the sofa and swear. Now, this kept me from getting in trouble with the grown-ups, but the kids didn't want to play with me anymore. They called me stuck up. They called me teacher's pet. They had lots of names for me, but they did not invite me to their parties or their get-togethers or their playtime. Now, when we see autistic kids who don't have friends, this is a big part of it. What they needed to teach me was, Sarah, you're really good at academics. You can help your classmates with academics. What you're really not good at is knowing when the grown-ups are coming, knowing when you're allowed to do something or when you're not. Ask your friends for help. Let them know you don't know that. Trade homework help for this kind of help so that you don't keep getting in trouble. I needed to be taught it's okay to do bad things, just don't get caught. But no one taught me that. So how does this translate to you? The cultural rules are flexible everywhere. We cannot be taught the cultural rules. If we are, we will be awkward and ostracized because we do not know how and when to implement them. So every classroom has different cultural rules. Every group of friends has different cultural rules. Every college has different cultural rules. I'm not talking about conduct rules. I'm talking about cultural rules, right? So instead, what neurotypical people need to do for us is they need to, first of all, give a most respectful interpretation. If something we're doing or saying doesn't fall within your cultural expectations, just give the benefit of the doubt, assume the best. But then if you really don't understand, you can manage your stories by asking questions. So, and this works if someone is trying to be rude as well. You can say, I'm not sure I understood what you meant. Could you say that again another way? Or reword your own statement. And you can say, I think maybe what I said did not come across the way I meant it. Let me rephrase. So I have an example of this from when I was teaching. I was actually facilitating a book club in our faculty commons. And one of the participants, everything I said, with a big smile on her face, she kept shaking her head. Everything I said. And I thought, goodness, she just doesn't agree with anything I'm saying. I don't know why she's smiling and shaking her head at me. So afterwards, because I had not met her before, I went up to her and I said, it's so great to meet you. I'm really glad that you came to the book club. Can you help me understand? Because you seemed really happy to be here, but it also seemed like you disagreed with a lot of what I was saying because you were shaking your head. Can you help me understand? She said, oh, I'm from India. That was a head bobble. That means yes. So I was agreeing with everything you were saying. So I don't know if some of you have likely experienced that Indian head bobble, right? That means, yes, that's awesome. What you're saying is fantastic. But I did not know that. And so I'm glad I asked her and we were able to establish a wonderful relationship. But if I hadn't asked, I would have just thought she didn't like me and disagreed with everything I said. So ask clarifying questions. And then also own your own boundaries. If someone is, yes, exactly, Thorsten, yeah. Own your own boundaries. If someone is ramping up, if a student is ramping up and you can't handle that, right? You're ramping up as well and you don't want to, leave the situation for a little bit, but you don't need to focus on their situation, focus on your own. So you can say, I'm going to go grab a cup of coffee. You don't need to say, I'll be back when you're calmed down, right? You just need to exit. Change yourself, not other people. Okay, so here's what's in, I'm not going there. Go back. What? I didn't ask you to go here. I don't know what happened. Okay. Here's what's included in nonverbal communication. All sorts of things. You can still see my deck, correct? Okay. All these different things, facial expressions, gestures, body language, eye gaze, even how we use sense of humor, right? And also included needing to read between the lines, unspoken, implied, or hidden meaning within spoken communication. So a lot of times people will not say what they mean, and they'll try to soften it and be kind. Brene Brown, in her book, Dare to Lead, says clear is kind, unclear is unkind. And you can get there by going on this link, which I accidentally clicked on. So in our culture, the United States, up to 85% of our communication is nonverbal. So the thing to know with this is research shows that not only do we not understand your nonverbal communication, you don't understand ours. So go back to asking clarifying questions, not assuming that you know, using the most respectful interpretation. And if there is a communication mismatch, ask for clarification. We're not going to practice because we don't have time. I'm sorry, we ran out of time. I apologize. So you can think about this though, what you might say instead of these things. Instead of saying you might want to think about changing this part, you can say, I can see you've worked really hard on this. This part here needs some changes. Let me know if you need help with it, right? A lot of times someone shows up to your office and you say, oh, hi, I was just leaving. That does not say to the person, I can't talk to you right now, right? So be sure you say what you're saying. This is a famous one that parents say to their kids, right? Is that what you're wearing? Right? They're implying, please don't wear that. Okay. All right. So let's move on. This is just another thing for if you're having a communication mismatch, consider, is the other person communicating opposite from you? So direct, indirect, concrete, abstract, logical, emotional, detailed, general. If you can slide more in their direction, go ahead and do that to bring your communication more in line with each other. Okay, I'm not going to play this either because there isn't time and it's 3 whole minutes. It will take us to the end, but I will put the link in the chat so you can listen to it. Nope. So just remember for students, it's not a disabled dog, it's a cat. You don't need to turn it into a dog. So we're going to wrap up with neurodivergent people may have differences in conversational language styles, including that direct communication instead of softening things up. Excellent problem-solving skills, ability to hyperfocus, strong visual memory, or a need to record. So they may need notes or they may need to record things. A need for others to reach out to include them. So thinking about classes, they're likely not the ones who are going to reach out. High energy and drive, deep knowledge and enthusiasm in areas of interest in problem solving in general. This can show up in class, as you likely know. It's okay to say, this is great information. Please send me an email with the rest of it and I can share it with the class. And in a social conversation, same thing. Wow, you've told me a lot about the life cycle of aphids. Can I tell you something now? High empathy, possibly shown unconventionally, strong pattern recognition, and superior attention to detail, basically strengths and weaknesses along a continuum like everyone else. Providing feedback, make sure it's timely. I tell my students I grade every weekend. So they know, be specific and direct, include positives. Someone said 3 positives for every negative. Problem solve with your student. Make sure they have the agenda ahead of time. I always publish my modules 2 weeks ahead of time. Allow participation options. We're going to talk a lot more later. Follow-up notes. For social activities, have accessible options. People sometimes forget accommodations for social activities. Allow people to opt out or have options and plan together. And last thing I want to say is, if you want someone to stop doing something, tell them what you'd like them to do instead. So if I don't want you to talk about or think about a pink multicolored cat, I will not say, don't think about a multicolored cat, right? I will say, think about a pink butterfly or something like that. So remember my blood type and be positive. And then these are just your resources. And I'm sorry, I ran a little over, so there isn't question time, but that's what I got for you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. We will have a breakout session in 15 minutes at 10:30 for faculty that is directed towards how to help teach, assess, work with neurodivergency with our students. And we will see you then. Everybody grab a cup of coffee or something to eat.
If you want the social link, I'm putting it on right now for that video link. There you go. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
There you are. Hello, Sarah. I just sent you a chat. All right. Why don't I take this down? And we are ready to move on to the second session this morning on techniques, tools, and assessment methods. Sarah Gardner is going to be the host of this particular presentation. Good to see you again, Sarah.
Are you ready for me to take over?
Yes, please. Please take over.
Okie doke, I will do it. Hi, everyone. Hopefully I already met you in the previous workshop. I'm glad you're back. If so, we're going to be talking about teaching neurodivergent students pedagogical practices to include all students. If you were able to see Lydia yesterday, you heard that not all students who are in your class are necessarily diagnosed, had access to diagnosis, and have many intersections of identity going on that may cause them to need the things we're going to talk about today. So although we're talking about neurodivergent students and we learned what things affect neurodivergent students in the last session, all of the things we talk about today really apply to all students in the classroom, as many of you likely know. So let me share the slide deck and then we will get going. And as in the last session, if you feel comfortable having your camera on so I can see your face, that's awesome. If not, no worries. As long as I can see a couple of people, I'm good. I found during the pandemic, if I start presenting to just little black boxes, I get a little confused as to where I am and what I'm doing. Today, this will be an interactive session, so you're going to need to unmute and talk or write in the chat, hopefully quite a bit. So we have on the screen here a little square stick figure person who just drew a light bulb on the chart. So hopefully we'll be sharing lots of great ideas today as we go along. So what we're going to be talking about, first we're going to talk about classroom and campus climate. What is that like? How can we make it inviting and accessible for all students, including neurodivergent students? And then designing our curriculum to include neurodivergent students. Identifying your current practices and sharing your experiences, because we all learn from each other. I always learn from you when I do something like this. Looking at some tools for inclusive design, and then also talking about group work. So Alexander Denier said, when a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower, right? So we want to make sure that we are not trying, as we talked before, to fix the student, but we're trying to fix our environment so all students can relax, focus on learning, and feel invited and like they belong in the environment. So let's take a look at what that means. The first thing that we all need to do is, remember the old phrase, put on your mask first? Used to mean when you were in an airplane and the oxygen masks came down, that you would put on your oxygen mask first before you tried to help someone else. Now masks have taken on a different meaning. This is a picture of my masks at the beginning of the pandemic when we were wearing cloth masks and I was washing and drying them all the time. But now we need to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves and others in our community. So this may mean our group of friends, our family, or our colleagues. So if you would, in the chat or unmute yourself or raise your hand and share, how do you practice community care? And community care is different from self-care. So self-care might be taking a bubble bath or doing meditation by yourself. But community care is caring for each other. It's bringing chicken noodle soup to your friend who is ill. It's checking in on your mother every day to make sure how she's doing, things like that. So put in the chat or raise your hand to share or simply unmute yourself. Any of those things are fine. How do you practice community care? And if you don't yet practice community care, what are your questions? Yes, volunteering on a crisis line, Colleen. Mm-hmm. Keep your yard looking nice for people to feel. Yes, showing up for others, events that are planned. Donate to the local homeless shelter. Open your home to foster children. Mm-hmm. How are you? How's it going? Yes. Try to actually listen for the answer. That's nice, Liz. Yeah. Watching other people's pets while they're on vacation. It's a nice community care thing to do. Frequent how is it going check-ins. Yep. Help with COVID vaccinations. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Small acts of kindness. Meal trains. Yes, Cami. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask another question. Think about this. How do you ask for community care? Offering help with yard work, groceries, etc. So how do you get community care for yourself? This is something we talk about in my classes, my students, when they're learning self-advocacy. We are often very good at helping others, and we are often not good at asking for help. Yes, we honestly never thought to ask that of others. Exactly, Mike. Yes. That's why I bring this up, your mask first. We cannot serve our students if we are not being taken care of. Ask a neighbor to come sit our house so we can go on a walk together. Yeah, oh, that's very nice. Admitting weakness can be hard. Yeah, admitting that you need help can be hard. Becoming part of a caring community means not always being the person on top, but being part of the community that needs help. Right? If we are always the ones who are giving, we will run out of the ability to give. And so when you find yourself frustrated, when you find yourself tired, that is a sign that you need that community care yourself. Allowed respite care to help with my child. Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. Sharing what could help you. So this is something to really think about, and think about for the future. How do you get community care? And this is something I've been thinking about for the past year or so. As I get older, as I was diagnosed with sleep apnea, all these different things, I need more help. And I am used to being very independent, and independence is just another thing of our white supremacist culture that says we have to do everything ourselves. Asking my besties if they have spoons, our way of asking is if they have the emotional capacity to hear woes or rants. Yes, asking permission to, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Thank you. Yeah, so please do think about this concept. Your mask first, taking care of your needs first, and you are not the only person responsible for your needs, right? Other people in your community can help you. and should be helping you. Okay. Some people set up a community care group, right? Amongst their colleagues, amongst their friends, amongst their family. All right. So now I want to flip a little bit and talk about how we're interacting with our students by taking you on, and other people in our lives, by taking you on a little journey. And this is very interactive. So please feel free to unmute and just call out your answers or type your answers in the chat. But we're going to go on a little journey. This is good for you. You're in Denver, so you've probably experienced this. Down a snow-covered road in the middle of a blizzard in a very remote area. You are either driving the car or you're a passenger in the car. And so I want you to really think about yourself in this situation. You're driving along, you're being driven along, and suddenly this symbol of a little black symbol with I don't know what that is, kind of a half oval or something, comes up with a little exclamation point in the middle. What is that symbol? Does anybody know? Again, feel free to unmute or just type it. Yep, low pressure, low tire pressure. That's exactly what that is. It's a low tire pressure symbol. That symbol comes up on your dashboard. How do you feel? Irritated. Fine. Some people feel fine. Scared, stressed, a little nervous. Okay. Brain fatigued. Another problem to fix. Yes, Mike. Yes, I'm with you. 100% with you for that. Okay. What do you do? Wait till you get home. Okay, so the car starts clunking around, so it's clearly a problem. Slow down a bit, keep driving. You keep a pump in the car so you can fix it. Stop and check the tire pressure to see how it is. Yeah, so it becomes apparent to you pretty quickly that you need to stop because you start like swiveling all over the road and the car's clunking and everything. So you need to stop and check. So you stop and check, and looks like Dr. Cloxton has a pump in the car. How are the rest of you feeling? Yes, say a lot of swear words to get your, and then, okay, so Mike's going to call AAA. So I have some news for you. You're in a very remote area. There is no cell service. So now how are you feeling? There's no cell service and your tire is flat. You're on the rim. In fact, let's say you have 2 flat tires. You're on the rims. How are you feeling now? No cell service. Panicked, a bit of stress. Do I have a spare? Never mind. Oh yeah, because you have 2 flat tires. No. Okay, let's just say you have 1. We'll give you only 1. Okay, you have 1 flat tire. Anxious, needing to problem solve, scream feelings. Anybody else have other feelings? This is going to be expensive. I have to get out on the rims looking for houses. You're not going to be able to get out on the rims. Do you see this cliff over here? It would be very dangerous for you to be driving on the rims right now. Okay, so what's the next thing you do? There's no houses, too remote. What do you do next? Dr. Klotzen believes that they have a pump in their trunk. What else? What are the rest of you doing? Can't make a phone call. Bundle up. Good idea. Try to figure out how far I have to walk. Too far. Look for tire changing gear. Did I remember to keep my stuff there? Is the spare working? Okay, Mike's on the right track. What do you need to change a spare tire? Who knows? Dr. Cloxton's got the pump, lug wrench. What else? That T-shaped thing. The jack. Okay, the jack is missing. And Dr. Cloxton, I'm sorry to tell you, but whoever used that pump last did not return it to where it belongs. So there's nothing out in the woods that you can use to prop up your car. So my question to you is, can you change your flat tire? No, I know, right, Dr. Clarkson? I don't know who didn't put it back, but they didn't put it back. So how are you feeling now? Anxiety to the sky. Worst nightmare for an ESL person with MS. Yes, isolated. Okay, you cannot change your flat tire without that jack. I'm cussing with Mike and probably crying. Yep. Yeah, afraid. Yeah. This is becoming a dangerous situation, right? Frustrated and scared. All right. Along comes a police car. How do you feel when you see the police car? Relief. Scared. Hopeful, nervous, desperate. So one thing to note, different people have different feelings when they see a police car. Not everybody feels relief. Depends on your race and your previous experiences. Yep, for sure. Yep. So the police car comes up, they roll down their window, and they say to you, I see you have a flat tire. You know what? I'm sure you've changed flat tires before, but I want you to know, now this is a law in Washington. It's probably not a law in Denver. You're not allowed to leave your car on the side of the road for longer than a half an hour in a snowstorm. So you're going to need to get that fixed, or this part is not true. We're going to fine you $5,000. We're going to tow your car, impound it. You'll have to pay to get it out. And there's going to be a mark on your record. And then they drive away. So how do you feel now? Angry, frustrated, desperate, defeated. You know the consequence for not changing your tire. Can you change it now? You know what's going to happen if you don't change it. No, you still can't change it. All right. Along comes another police car. How do you feel when you see that police car coming up? The way I usually do after interactions with law enforcement. Yeah. Now I'm just afraid, annoyed, skeptical. Yeah, Colleen probably felt relief at first, but now is skeptical. Facepalm. Oh, for all the luck. All right. The second police car comes up and says to you, my partner told me that you have a flat tire, and I can see that. I have a lot of faith in you. I'll bet you've changed a lot of flat tires in your life, and I'm sure you're going to be able to do it. Notice how positive they are. So I have some great news for you. When you get your flat tire changed, so notice they know how to say when, not if. When you get your flat tire changed, we have a special going on in our great city right now. You are not only will you get a free set of tires gifted to you by the city, not only will you avoid that fine and the towing and everything, you will also get a free set of tire changing tools, brand new tire changing tools, and you will get your choice of free coffee or free donuts for a year. Isn't that great? Oh, and I almost forgot, I have this for you to help you change your tire. I have this great pad that you can kneel on to help you. This has helped so many people before in your situation. So I know it's going to help you. I know it'll do it. Good luck. See you.